There were some big developments on this week's edition of WWE Raw, the fallout from SummerSlam, as plenty to talk about, of course, coming out of that show on both nights. Seth Rollins cashes in to become the World Heavyweight Champion. Brock Lesnar returns for John Cena on night 2, and we knew there were going to be some big things that went down on this week's Raw. And it all kind of focused around Seth Rollins and the Vision, which, of course, is seemingly the new name for this group of Rollins, Braun Breaker, Bronson Reed, and Paul Heyman, the Oracle himself. And that was really what this entire show was built around, where you had Rollins defend the World Heavyweight Championship against LA Knight, which we talked about before. Seemed like an obvious direction to go in, given the fact that Knight did beat Rollins in this now infamous match, his Saturday night's main event, where the injury happened. And so Knight came out making that point that I thought was probably the point to make. It seemed very obvious that he was the last person to beat Seth Rollins, and so he deserved a title shot. He got that title shot, but it was CM Punk who was actually the person who maybe cost LA Knight from winning the title against Seth Rollins. A lot of things, as we said, to work with coming out of this, especially considering that the final visual on the show was Seth Rollins, Braun Breaker, Bronson Reed beating down CM Punk, LA Knight, and Roman Reigns. And so now it seems like there at least are some hints at the future direction here, and possibly even as far out as WrestleMania 42. I think one of the things that we certainly learned on the show is that clearly there is going to be this sort of smaller type rivalry between Punk and LA Knight. If you're LA Knight, sure, you're pissed off at the fact that CM Punk may have just cost you a chance at the title, but CM Punk also saved LA Knight from getting his face smashed into not the mat, to the concrete floor, because Seth Rollins had already raised the mat up on the outside. Knight was about to get the stomp, but Punk dives in and makes the save. So, WWE is kind of putting, I think, an interesting twist on this in that, obviously, they're fine with using like your top baby faces against each other, telling the stories that sort of have those two intertwining, but I think this is one where if you're looking at Clash in Paris, more so in the short term, Seth Rollins, you would think, probably has a spot on that show. Maybe, because think about this, the main event of Clash in Paris seems to more and more likely perhaps look like it could be John Cena versus Brock Lesnar. We were debating that on Sunday night about when they could do that match. Some were thinking, well, maybe they hold it off until Crown Jewel in October. But Cena's advertised for that show, and unless you go to Cena and Brock Lesnar, which is the obvious direction coming out of SummerSlam, I'm not sure who Cena faces there, because I'm not sure anyone else makes a lot of sense for John Cena right now, other than the Beast himself, who made his return. And so, for Seth Rollins, you've got to think that there is a sort of situation here for him where he's going to defend that championship, likely against both Punk and LA Knight. You could certainly see a triple threat match. I don't know if WWE necessarily wants to do Punk versus LA Knight, because then you are kind of putting in a position where you make the fans choose sides, right? I'm not sure there's a huge winner in either one of those, and probably more so the fans are going to pick Punk over LA Knight. So I don't know if that does Knight any favors. So you would think the triple threat could be in motion just because Punk has a claim in that he won the World Championship against Gunther. Then he got sort of the surprise cash-in from Seth Rollins, and as Adam Pearce showed on this show, Pearce is not going to stand for this lying bullshit out there. So Adam Pearce could be the person who says, you know what? I'm not going to stand for all this lying. I'm not going to, kind of stand for how Seth Rollins won this title. So I will give Punk his rightful rematch as the former champion, even if it was for 5 minutes or whatever it was. And LA Knight never lost this match on Raw, so you could certainly see the wheels in motion to do the triple threat. And unfortunately, it would seem like in that scenario, maybe Knight being the person to take the pin. But it's also a way you can stay out of doing Punk versus Rollins one-on-one again just yet, because we know that's coming. You're going to have to do that match at some point too, although, again, another option could potentially be doing Punk versus Knight. The winner goes on and faces Rollins, possibly at Clash in Paris, or maybe you do that as kind of a big Raw, or, again, you still got a couple months before you get the Crown Jewel. So the schedule nowhere near as packed as it was really over the past 2 months. And so you've got a little room here to do some of these bigger matches on Raw, but also, again, we know there are available options with these next two PLEs, Clash in Paris on August 31st and Crown Jewel coming up in early October. So that's one part of the story here, right? Is that we are seemingly heading towards a potential triple threat if they decide to go that direction. Like I said, I mean, maybe they just want to do the straight one-on-one matches again with Rollins versus Punk or Rollins versus Knight, but I do think there's probably a little bit more intrigue, and WWE loves their triple threat matches these days. We know that. So that may be something that you could see. Like I said, not sure if that happens in Clash in Paris or not. It would seem obvious, I would think, because if you want to really load up that show, if your main event is John Cena versus Brock Lesnar, then to have that match as well on there, that's a pretty stacked card for Paris, France. But again, there are options to work with on that. The other kind of story here, I think, coming out of Raw is that I think we had a pretty clear understanding of what they want to achieve with Roman Reigns. Because as we've said, this is now a situation where we know Roman Reigns is not going to be on WWE television every single week. There were the reports out there that September is sort of the target for when he's going to be filming his role in the Street Fighter movie, which, as we've said, Cody Rhodes is also part of that. And so, for Roman Reigns, he is kind of in a position now where he just got beat down again. I mean, how many times I feel like over the past, how long, 6 months, have we kind of led with the headline that Roman Reigns just got destroyed? And now it happens again via the same group, Rollins, Breakker, and Reed. And so I think what we learned here with Roman Reigns is that could he possibly factor in something in the short term where, again, I've seen some people say, well, you know what, maybe the obvious six-man tag is there for Clash in Paris. Could you do Roman Reigns, CM Punk, LA Knight versus Seth Rollins, Braun Breakker, Bronson Reed? That could be a possibility. That six-man tag could be a possibility somewhere else outside of Clash in Paris. But that is certainly another direction that WWE could be hinting at with what they did on Raw. But something else I think became very clear. We had all been talking about the Roman Reigns versus Braun Breakker match. We knew they had to get to that one at some point. We also knew they had to get to Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns at some point too. And I'll talk about that in a second. But I think it's become very clear now that WWE is going to do Roman Reigns versus Bronson Reed. Because how could you not? You've got the tribal thief himself and the Shula Fala around this man's neck. He's done it twice now. He has stolen the shoes right off of Roman Reigns' feet. Twice. So, the first time around, you could say, all right, that was a nice little device to get you to the tag team match with Roman and Jay against Braun. But now that he's done it twice, I don't know if a tag team match is going to suffice here when it comes to Roman Reigns getting some payback on Bronson Reed. So it does seem like, even though we're looking at this and wondering, okay, all these different match combinations that Reigns could have the rest of the year and possibly going into WrestleMania 42, I mean, I don't know if it's going to be a lot of them. So that could be the three right there that he has in the next, 6 to 8 months. Could simply be Roman Reigns versus Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns versus Braun Breakker, Roman Reigns versus Bronson Reed. But there's, of course, another option here, and that is, I think we're also, sorry to take the pun here, Seth Rollins, but we're also seeing the vision for Survivor Series. Because Survivor Series is not that far away now. We're in August, it's in November. As we said, WWE doesn't mind doing the slow burns these days. And so, if you're starting to see the vision for Survivor Series, you have to expect that you're going to have Seth Rollins' group in there. Rollins, Breakker, Reed. And don't worry, it's not going to be the Oracle. He's not going to be fighting in this match. There will probably be another member by that point of this group, and we talked about the possible scenarios, whether it's a Ricky Saints, whether it's an Ethan Page. I know some people have thrown out Karrion Kross and all this other possibility. Well, if you saw the reports on Karrion Kross, it seems like he may be out of WWE, depending on what you want to believe. And so there's lots of different options here, but listen, I think that clearly you're going to use your top group in a WarGames type setting because that's what they always do. And we know we're not going to be breaking up Seth Rollins' group by the time November rolls around. This is a long-term play, but on the face side of things, you are looking at the likelihood, I would think, that for a second year in a row, you could have reluctant partners. WWE always does it, right? The allies of convenience. And so you could have Roman Reigns and CM Punk teaming up again. You could have LA Knight as one of the main featured parts of that group. Then it's a matter of, is it Jey Uso? Is it Sami Zayn? Because at that point, Sami's not going to be that far away from what I still believe it could be one of his defining moments over this next, 6 to 8 months, and that is winning the Royal Rumble in 2026 in Saudi Arabia to go on to challenge for the World Championship at WrestleMania 42. So I think you're already seeing it set in motion that you could have all these different guys like Reigns and Punk and Knight and whoever else, like I said, Jay or Zayn. They're all going to probably be in a situation where they are in WarGames together. Once again, you're probably going to have the tension between that team versus a very strong, cohesive heel group of Reigns, or like we said, of Rollins, Breakker, Reed, and whoever else at that point. And so they are putting a lot in place, and I think you could see that just on this Raw, right? We kind of knew some of this stuff coming out of SummerSlam, but they just set up a lot of stuff just in really, a couple different big segments on the show, and I think they did achieve a lot with it because, like I said, think about all the things we just mentioned as possible scenarios now that could play out, and you could run all this stuff for the next several months and be just fine. But to take it a step further, are we now looking at the possibility of it actually being Roman Reigns versus Seth Rollins at WrestleMania 42? Because, as we said, if you're looking at this and seeing kind of the timeline for Roman Reigns, they're not going to do, I can't imagine they're going to do Reigns versus Rollins anytime before that. Because if you're looking again at the possible places that Reigns is going to be slotted back into, the WarGames, you're not going to do a singles match there. The Royal Rumble, I guess, could be a possibility if you wanted to do that again. We've seen that one time before at the Rumble, as we know. But it does feel like the kind of match where if you think about what happened at WrestleMania 41 and the big turn, for Heyman to join Rollins 1 year later would not be a surprise at all if that is what they go with. I know some people have, talked about, well, do we do Cody versus Roman Part 3? That could be a potential option. I've told you, I still like the idea. If you're right now looking at this, I still like it better to do Cody versus Punk and do Reigns versus Rollins. I think those are probably two of the biggest matches you could do for a WrestleMania type setting. But then again, if you've got Brock Lesnar thrown back into the mix now, which I think Gunther could be certainly a possibility for him at that point, there are lots of different ways you could do this and feel like you have your big matches. And I think that is what they've set up here by having all these different guys sort of intertwining now with the Punk and Reigns dynamic back in play. You guys saw the footage after Raw. They were arguing and all this, and LA Knight, of course, was still pissed off at CM Punk. And so now that you're adding Knight into the mix, it does put LA Knight in a position where now his profile is raised even more. And we've said that's what we want to see. A lot of people just see LA Knight get that big opportunity to win a big match. He beat Rollins Saturday night's main event. Ultimately, didn't mean a lot because of the whole ruse, but now you're seeing him put into this role. Does he stay there for a Survivor Series? And what does his outlook look like for next year's WrestleMania? Again, I know it's hard to kind of just look at it and say, man, we just rolled through all these scenarios. But I think they achieved that on Raw. They achieved being able to set up all these different things, not just in the next month, but really for the next 6 months or more. And I think you can see that now with the vision that WWE has for where they're going with Seth Rollins and this group. So you guys let me know what you think. What do you see as sort of the match combinations coming out of this? What are we going to get in Paris? What are we going to get maybe at Crown Jewel? What's going to be the Survivor Series one? What are your early predictions for WrestleMania? WWE is now in the long-term booking business. They are planning this stuff out way ahead, whereas the previous regime wasn't always the case. So now it seems like they have a clear destination for where they want to go with a lot of these stories, and I think it's going to be fun to see how it plays out. All right, appreciate you guys watching. As always, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button as well, and let me know your early thoughts on maybe some of these big matches that are coming up. Clash in Paris, Crown Jewel, Survivor Series WarGames, and maybe even WrestleMania 42.